So today I want to talk about how do you know you've actually been healing for trauma, or like a past deep wound around intimacy and, just really hard experiences. And there's a couple reasons why I wanted to talk about this. One reason is because I have some people that come to me that have experienced acute trauma when it comes to their intimate life, and so they're not always sure if they should be working with me or not. But then at the same time, the therapeutic industry has not really improved people's lives, the intimate part of their lives, in a significant way. Like, we still struggle with relationships, dating. People are still being sexually assaulted all the time. And even though people are more aware of their traumas, I don't know if we're actually healing, because again, I feel like healing is more about wholeness and embodiment, and like you actually living a different, healed, happier version of your life. It's not necessarily about being able to talk about it all the time. If that was the case, then we would be in a much better position as a collective, because with the internet and with social media, people are constantly talking about things that happen to them, especially like with the Me Too movement, and about things that they're not happy about, things that they would like to change, and like not even complaining. Some just people just like talking about things that happened and just like the state of the world. But even with all of this information, like people are still not having better experiences. Like, why is that? And also, I think it's very important for people to know, like, how do we bridge that gap? And am I somebody that, you could possibly want to work with? Being that I'm not a licensed therapist, and people are really big on that, and I get it and I understand that, but being that there's this huge gap in like people actually healing and having better lives and people actually going to therapy, I think it's a discussion that we need to have. And so this is why it's very important. And the first thing I want to say is that a lot of times people think that healing is like a final destination, like you do all the steps and then all of a sudden you're healed and you go on to live a really great life. But healing is a lot more subtle than that. Healing is like in the little things. It comes in the mundane experiences and like having little awakenings along the way that help you make different decisions so you can create the reality that you want. And sometimes you will have something that happens that shakes you up or enlightens you in a big way, especially if you do embodiment things that will change the course of your life overnight. But most of the time, even getting to those points, there's a lot of little steps that happen, and the healing continues to happen along the way. But I also want to share my own recent story of how I started to discover, like, oh, okay, I know I'm actually healing. So last year I went through a very painful breakup. If you've been following me for at least the past year, you probably know that. And what made it more complicated is that I share a child with this person. And the child is very young. So we basically have to see each other almost every day, except maybe on the weekend. But we talk at least briefly every day. And in the beginning, it was very hard, because it's like, oh, how do I heal from somebody that hurts me, that I feel hurt me and betrayed me, that I have to see every day? And for a little while, I tried to just like let bygones be bygones and just like kind of pretend it didn't happen and just like move forward. I tried to rush the healing process, and then I would just feel hurt again because I felt like my experiences weren't being validated. And then after I just allowed myself to feel my pain and go through whatever I need to go through, and then after I got past the grief point and I started to look forward and to think about, well, what type of life do I want? This isn't a clean slate for me, and I can actually, in a lot of areas that I was settling, and he may have felt that I was settling, and that may have been why he rebelled and other things. Not me excusing for like being betrayed or anything, but like it was more complicated, I think, than what I initially saw it as. And as I started to gain like a more eagle-eyed perspective of the whole situation, and I did my my meditations, and I did my yoga and my journaling and all that stuff, there came to a point where I realized I was not that person. I'm not that person that I used to be. It's like I jumped timelines and I became a whole new version of myself. And I knew I became a whole new version of myself when I stopped identifying with the person from the past. And I started to react to my ex in that way. So at some point along my healing journey, I realized like, oh, I'm a completely different person now. Like, it's literally as if I'm a whole different human being. And it's not that that part didn't exist, because I wouldn't have the knowledge and the wisdom that I had if I wouldn't have been that person at some point. But when you have really shifted the way you think and the way you see the world, you become a completely different person, because you are your consciousness. And once I saw myself completely different, like more confident, better boundaries, even like sexier, or whatever it was that made me feel good about myself, and just thinking that, you know, I deserve this. I was more patient, less triggered, like all of these things. I'm like, oh, he did those things to me in the past because I was available for those things to be done to me. Now I'm not available for that. So there's nothing that he does that intimidates me or really shakes me in the way that it used to. And being that we have daily interactions, I was able to actually see my growth. There was a point where there was just certain things that he would text me or say that just did not bother me in the way that it used to. And I also realized that sometimes, because I was constantly triggered, there was times when he wasn't even trying to do anything mean to me, but because of experience in the past, I would assume things, which would create more chaos than needed to be created too. And so I just became much more aware of that. And so I was able to look at him with less bitterness, and just interact with him like as someone that I met, not necessarily for the first time, but just like with fresh eyes, but kind of like I was meeting him for the first time, because I'm a new version of myself. This new version of myself is now meeting, you know, my ex. And that's how I look at every interaction. It's like, I don't look at it from the past, because he's interacting with a completely different person. I was like, that's how I knew I was healing, because now my past is not controlling how I experience the present. Like, I experience the interactions with my ex in a completely different way. I'm also now living a completely different reality, because I respond to things differently, which creates a different reality. And I think it's really important for people to realize that, because I don't think about this as talked about enough, like embodied healing. Like, that's how you know things are getting better. What I have found a lot of times, especially with highly intellectual people, successful people, they will talk about going to therapy, sometimes even brag about it. And then you'll hear things going on in their life, and it's like they don't have a lot of improvement in it. So maybe they are still making good money, or maybe they still on the outside are looking like things are good, and they're like aware of like some of the things they went in their childhood and why certain things happen, but they're still stuck in a major area of their life, especially as it pertains to intimacy. I know millionaires that are like this. I know people who are middle class that are like this. I know people who are educators, podcasts, like all across the board, where they are aware of their traumas, but there's still a lot of chaos and a lot of like them just being stuck in a certain area of their life. Like, they keep experiencing similar things. I also have witnessed people who will start talking about their traumas, and they just keep going and going and going and going, where they're actually like reliving the experience as it happened, and there's a lot of anxiety around their story, and they just keep going and going. I'm sure you've probably met somebody like that. Not even somebody that's always trauma dumping, but someone where when they keep talking and they have to go around and through and up and down just to explain something that's very simple, because they're overactive in their crown chakra, and they've disassociated from their body. When you disassociate from one area of consciousness, what happens is the other area has to work harder. So it's like you have a company, right? Say you have like a marketing team, you have an executive team, and you have a team that does the labor. If the marketing team is completely fired or gets cut out for whatever reason, nobody's doing the marketing, then that means the executives probably have to take over the marketing. And so that means the executives are doing more work, and they're getting overworked, so they can't do what their responsibility is or do it as effectively. And so the overall company can't be as productive, because one sector of the company is overworked and now you can't be as efficient. The same thing with your body, same thing with consciousness. If you are not able to use your whole self, and you are constantly over intellectualizing, over analyzing, over articulating stuff from the past, then you're not using your body and your body consciousness to help guide you and heal too. So again, healing is in balance, and consciousness works in tandem with each other, especially when we're talking about psychic centers and different parts of the brain and what we also call chakras in Tantra. If you're overworking one aspect of self, then that means you're neglecting another aspect, and there's no wholeness in that, and that means there's not a lot of health in that, which means you are going to be creating a reality from that place that's unhealthy, okay? And because you don't have a balanced perspective of things. And what I find in our society, unfortunately, is there is so much emphasis put on being intellectual, on cognitive, like discipline and processing and all this stuff. And even in traditional therapy, what are you doing? You're talking about the things that happened to you. Well, how do you feel about that? Well, how do you feel about that? So you're constantly like reliving the experience over and over again. And the only time I really think talk therapy is extremely helpful is when you're actually unframing things, or if you're reframing things, or you've been holding things in for so much, for so long, and you had nobody to talk to, that you can actually unpack it and be validated in your experience. But it doesn't need to be the thing you do all the time, because that's not where the healing happens. That's just where the awareness happens. It's just kind of like, say you're extremely overweight, right? And you want to stop having back problems, and you want to be able to do things that someone maybe that isn't overweight is able to do, whatever that is. And then you go to a dietitian, and you tell them what you eat every day and all this stuff. That's not going to help you lose weight. What's going to help you lose weight is when you actually get a program or a diet, and you actually follow it, that actually helps you, either cut out calories or supports your body in a way that allows you to exercise and move more. Or if you have insulin resistance or something like that, where you adjust like the types of foods that you are eating, and you actually eat those things, and maybe you have to exercise more or whatever. That's what actually changed your life, and that's when you actually start to heal. That's when you actually start to lose the weight. I think what happens in traditional therapy is because there's an overemphasis on like the higher chakras and consciousness and intellectualizing and analyzing everything. There's so much emphasis on words and not enough on the body, that people are just saying a bunch of stuff and reliving it, but they're not actually changing their lives. The reason why I emphasize body consciousness so much, and Tantra and yoga and things like that, is because your body will tell you that you are healed before your mind will. Your mind plays tricks on you all the time, but your body is never going to tell you a lie, because it's always constantly working for you. And this is why primal instincts are so important, and why I've been talking a lot about men lately and how they see things, because a lot of times men operate from a place of primal instincts. They operate from a place of primal energy and understanding how they feel in their body about something, and they don't always over intellectualize everything. And when you emasculate men and make them think that their gut instincts are wrong, and then they start over analyzing things like females, or, and not saying that's just a female trait, but a lot of times women are more connected to their intuition and their heart energy and all this stuff, and they're not as connected to their guttural instincts, because we're just built different. So then they start taking on this idea that they can't trust their body, or they can't trust themselves. And it's very easy to program people when they're in their head. If your body tells you that something hurts, then you know that it hurts because you can literally feel it. But if somebody tells you that that doesn't really hurt and you should keep doing it, then your mind actually can do that. It can trick you into believing that something doesn't hurt. that something that hurts actually doesn't hurt. This happens all the time when people experience trauma. Like they get in situations intimately where they really like somebody and they want to maybe enjoy some physical intimacy or sex with them, but something doesn't feel right. Maybe they're going too fast, or maybe it's too rushed, or maybe the position is wrong, or maybe you just don't feel safe, or maybe they said something that made your body close off and contract, and your body is constantly sending you signs. Hey, we need to stop, we need to pause, this doesn't feel good. And the crazy thing is about this is that a lot of people want to experience pleasure, but they're completely ignoring the signs of their body saying that this is not pleasurable. But their mind will tell them, this person is attractive, this person has money, this person looks this way, so they're going to create this amazing experience for you. But when you're actually in it, your body is telling you what's actually going on. And a lot of times people will ignore that because they're used to abandoning themselves, either because in childhood nobody protected them or made them feel like their feelings didn't matter, or made them feel bad for exploring their bodies and understanding their bodies, that they don't listen to them. And our society does the same thing. We have a hierarchy on what we think intelligence is, or consciousness that's worthy of like being taken seriously. So when it comes to art, when it comes to athletics, when it comes to anything really that has to do with the body or body consciousness, it's the hierarchy level is down here. But anything that has to do with like cognitive displays of expression, or if you're able to articulate yourself with words very well, explain things in a certain way, or if you have a certain amount of education or knowledge and you're able to say those things out loud or write them, people will put that on a pedestal all day. But what I have found over and over again, especially when it comes to intimacy, trauma, those things, people who overanalyze things, over intellectualize things, people who have like a lot of education, they have all these degrees, it doesn't always translate into wisdom. It doesn't always translate into relatability, or them having or like actually living a healthy life. I've seen this happen all the time, especially with young women, young professionals. They will say all the things that sound really academic and smart, but when it comes to their actual life and their intimate life, they continuously experience the same type of trauma. They continuously experience intimacy issues and all these things, even though they've read all the books and they can like spit like some fire knowledge to you and they sound really good. But when you actually see what's going on in their life, you're like, whoa, okay, why are you making that decision? Why did you decide to do this? Because they completely disconnected from their body. It literally happens all the time. And because there's not a lot of emphasis put on body consciousness or art or mind-body exercises or things like that, other people think that it's not as important, so they ignore it. But I'm here to tell you that it is really important. And your body is not going to lie to you. In order to really heal and in order to create a reality that's actually the one that you want, you need to be able to connect with your body and listen to it, because it's not going to misguide you. It sounds a little like, I don't know, it might sound a little like woo-woo, or it may sound like a little like, oh, that's not enough, but really it's not that complicated. I love to use my 2-year-old daughter as an example. She, a lot of people talk about boundaries and how you have boundaries and all this stuff. But the thing is, we're born with boundaries. Like when my 2-year-old developed enough to know that she could say yes or no and that she had free will, she expresses it all the time. If there's something that she doesn't want to do, she says no. Anybody who has a toddler knows what I'm talking about. And not saying that she always has the best judgment, but she's very, very aware of like what she's okay with and what she's not. And she expresses it very firmly, even if she's got to scream, cry, whatever. But how do we get to that point when we're a 2-year-old and we say no as a sentence, period? People say that all the time. No is a sentence. 2-year-olds know that, but why do not grown women and grown men know that? Like if someone crosses your boundaries or does something that does not feel good to you, to just tell them no. Because somewhere along the way, somebody programmed us to believe that our body and our feelings are not as important as societal norms or being accepted in society, or maybe our parents made us feel like children are supposed to be seen and not heard, and it's my way or no way. Even if in your body you know that something is not quite right, that is what happened. And that's why body consciousness should not be thought of as secondary to like, you know, like talk therapy and things like that. And so I just wanted to share this because I think it's a really important message. I think it's not talked about enough. And if you're one of those people who find yourself constantly in a loop in your mind about something that happened in the past, or if somebody asks you about your past and you continue to talk about it, or if you're just someone who, when you are interacting with someone and you're communicating, you end up doing most of the talking and you're not listening, or you find yourself more on the listening and the talking end and you're not having like an equal like reciprocation of information. If you find yourself getting really anxious and just, you know, constantly can't sit with quietness and calmness, it's probably because there's a disconnect with your body and there's an imbalance in your consciousness and how you move through your life consciously every day. If you find that you get stuck in a rut because you'll have all these great intentions and you've attended all these workshops, but then when it actually comes to what you're experiencing in life and what you want, there's a disconnect. You might be living outside of your body most of the time. You might be in your head a lot and you need to learn to trust your body again. And you might be like just living in your memories. And even though things are looking different, you may be around different people, you might even live in a different place, but you're still having similar experiences. That is a sign you're probably disconnected with your body. And if you are ready to stop identifying with your pain, and you want to do like I did, and you are able to disconnect from your past and be somebody else, timeline jump, and like embody your healing, that's what I'm here for. That's what I do with my coaching. And I cover everything from things going on in your sex life and intimate life to like the conditioning of like, you know, how you got there in the first place, you know, like childhood wounds, things like that. I like to start with reframing things for people so that they can see them in a different perspective, unpacking them if we need to, but then also like giving you embodiment practices to help you trust your body again so that you can move forward and start creating the reality that you actually want. And so you can start to separate yourself from your wounds and not let those wounds control you anymore, because you know how to listen to your body. Tantra is and yoga is all about yoking, finding the connection. When there is a connection or a disconnect or a severing between the higher and lower self, there can't be wholeness. That means there can't be health. That means that you can't have everything at your disposal to create the reality that you want. So if this message resonates from you, I am taking new clients. And I also will be leaving some reflective prompts in the caption so that you can start to work on this, you know, if you don't have a coach or a therapist that is working on this with you. And I'll see you guys in the next video.